I always imagined I'd cry at my son's wedding, just not for the reason I did. The ceremony was beautiful. Crisp fall air, the kind that holds the promise of winter in it, swept across the vineyard. Golden leaves scattered under white chairs, and everything looked perfect. Every detail was elegant, curated, tasteful, and expensive, but I didn't mind. I paid for all of it. The tuxedos, the floral arches, the hand-calligraphed invitations, the $20,000 venue. Mine. All of it. Not that anyone seemed to remember or care. I showed up that day in my work uniform, navy blue coveralls with Dan's stitched over the chest pocket in white thread. It's the uniform I've worn for 20 years at the auto repair shop I own. The one I opened with a second mortgage and a prayer back when Ethan, my son, was still losing baby teeth. People noticed the uniform. His in-laws laughed when they saw me. I heard one of them, his mother-in-law, I think, whisper to her sister, "Oh dear, I thought that was the valet." Then louder, "At least he didn't try to dress up." Points for honesty. There was more chuckling. I caught the groom's new brother-in-law smirking as he walked past me to the bar. Someone actually said, "That must be the maintenance guy. Where's the father of the groom?" I was standing right there. I didn't say anything. I never really do in moments like that. I just smiled, nodded. I'd been underestimated my whole life, so their condescension didn't sting like it used to. But when I sat down at the reception and saw I'd been placed at table 9, the farthest table, half a mile from the head, something inside me went quiet. Still, hurt. I should say, Ethan didn't do this. Not on purpose. He's a good kid. Thoughtful. He loves me. I know that in my bones. But he also loves his bride, and her family has money, polish, social presence. I imagine there were pressures I'll never hear about. Maybe they thought putting me next to the open bar and behind a pillar was the best way to avoid awkwardness. But when the speeches started, that's when it broke me. The bride's father stood up and gave a 20-minute toast about legacy. He talked about how success was measured in titles and degrees, how real men build empires, not engines. He turned to Ethan and said, "Welcome to a family that believes in excellence." The room laughed and applauded. And I sat there, the man who paid for their champagne, in oil-stained coveralls, holding a water glass like it was a lifeline. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the years of swallowing pride. The late nights fixing transmissions so I could afford SAT tutors. Maybe it was how none of them looked at me like a person, just an obstacle they had to tolerate. Or maybe it was just time. So when the MC called for the father of the groom to say a few words, I stood up. I didn't walk to the mic right away. I took my time. Walked past the in-laws, past the bride's mother who wouldn't meet my eyes, past the groom's table where Ethan was frozen, eyes wide. He didn't know what I'd say. Truth be told, neither did I. I took the mic, cleared my throat, looked out over that room full of silk and perfume and disdain. "My name is Dan," I said. "I'm the father of the groom. And yes, I'm wearing my work uniform. It's not because I didn't have time to change, it's because I wanted you to see me. Really see me." A few polite chuckles. Mostly confusion. I've been a mechanic for most of my life. I own the shop over on 5th. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. And it paid for everything you see here today. The chairs, the lights, the catering, the venue. I paused. Yeah, this venue. I bought it last year. It wasn't originally part of the plan, but my son and his fiancée fell in love with it, and the dates they wanted were all booked. So I wrote a check. Bought the place outright. Thought it'd be a good investment. Silence. The bride's father stared at me like I'd grown horns. "I don't say this to boast," I continued. "I say this because some of you saw my name tag and thought you knew my worth. You whispered. You laughed. Some of you moved your purses under your chairs when I walked by." A woman on the left side went red. She had. And that's okay. I'm used to it. I've spent a lifetime being mistaken for less. Then I turned to Ethan. "But I want you to know, son, I never thought less of you. Not when you quit football. Not when you changed majors. Not even when you forgot to thank me in the program." He looked down at his lap. "I did all this not because I needed recognition, but because that's what fathers do. We show up. We build. We protect. And sometimes, we let you forget us for a little while, because we know you'll remember when it matters." The room was dead quiet. I smiled, gentle. "To those of you who judge me today, I forgive you. I hope, one day, your children look at you the way Ethan looked at me when he was 7 and I fixed his bike like I'd just invented the wheel." And with that, I walked back to table 9. No one clapped. No one needed to. The silence was enough. I sat back down, slid my chair in slowly, and took a sip of my water. My hands were steady, though my heart was pounding. Not from nerves. From release. The kind that comes when you've carried something too heavy, for too long, and finally set it down. For a moment, the entire ballroom seemed suspended, like the music forgot how to play and the air forgot how to move. A few people looked down at their plates. Others stared straight ahead like they were trying to undo what they'd just heard. Then, Ethan stood up. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at me. His eyes were glassy, but his jaw was firm. I'd seen that look before. Once, when he was 8 and crashed his bike into a tree but refused to cry. Another time, when he got rejected from his first-choice college and smiled through it for our sake. He had always carried his dignity like a quiet torch. And that night, I saw him light it again. He walked toward me, past the head table, past his new in-laws. Without hesitation, he knelt beside my chair and hugged me like a man drowning in gratitude. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered. "I should have. I didn't mean to." I patted his back. "You don't have to explain." He pulled away, eyes rimmed with red. "I didn't know you bought the venue." "I didn't need you to," I said. "I just needed you to be happy. That was always the point." He stood and turned to the room. "My father is the most decent man I've ever known," Ethan said. His voice was shaky, but loud enough to carry. "And if you laughed at him tonight, you laughed at the wrong person." That's when the silence cracked. Not with laughter, not with mockery, with a slow, unsure smattering of applause that grew into something awkward but sincere. It wasn't for me. Not really. It was for the truth finally showing up to a party it wasn't invited to. The rest of the night moved differently after that. The bride's father avoided me. Couldn't even look in my direction when we crossed paths by the dessert table. The mother-in-law, lips pressed so tightly I thought they'd disappear, offered a stilted, lovely speech before drifting into a different conversation. But something changed at table 9. People came by. People I hadn't spoken to all evening. An old neighbor I hadn't seen in years. One of Ethan's high school teachers. Even a couple of the groomsmen, who told me they used to bring their cars to my shop during college. "You always gave us a fair price," one of them said. "Didn't think anyone noticed stuff like that anymore." "I always notice," I replied. "And I do." The bride came over, too. Quiet. Red-eyed. "Mr. Jacobs," she said, voice soft. "I'm sorry for how my family treated you. I should have done better. I will do better." I nodded. "You're his family now. That's all that matters." After they left for their honeymoon, I stayed behind to help the staff clean up. I hadn't planned on it, but it felt right. Familiar. I stacked chairs, cleared glassware, even helped the DJ coil up his cables. One of the bartenders, a kid probably 23 at most, looked at me and said, "I thought you were just the janitor at first." But that speech, man, that was something. "Thanks," I said with a smile. "And hey, there's no just in being the janitor." He nodded. "You're right." I drove home that night with the windows down, the scent of wine and eucalyptus still clinging to my shirt. I didn't need a standing ovation. I didn't need a headline moment. I just needed to remind them, and maybe remind myself, that quiet dignity doesn't come from suits or applause. It comes from doing what's right, especially when no one's watching. In the days that followed, Ethan called me more, just to check in. We talked like we used to, before jobs and partners and grown-up pressures stretched the cord between us. One morning, he texted a photo of the vineyard. "Thinking of turning it into a family business," he wrote. "What do you think?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. Because maybe he was starting to understand the legacy I'd actually tried to leave him all along. Not wealth, not prestige, but roots. Values. The kind of legacy that can't be toasted in a speech. The kind that's built, bolt by bolt, in grease-stained coveralls. So, yes, at my son's wedding, they called me a disgrace. But I gave a speech that turned mockery into silence. And in that silence, something better grew. Respect. Not just for me, but maybe, just maybe, for the kind of man I'd always been, and always would be.